So, Matt, tell us more about this. This is the third and final part of a report citing that progress has been made, but more needs to be done. We're talking about historic corruption within boxing at the Olympics, right?
Yeah. It was the third part of the report yesterday. It didn't contain the bombshells that it did back in September. I guess, which was extraordinary. It was about, as you remember, it was about referees and judges being corrupt, being offered bribes, having meetings on the morning of bouts at the Rio Olympics and deciding before the bouts had even taken place who was going to win, this kind of stuff. The disappointing bit with it all for me, Jim, is that after that sort of, headline grabbing first report, they haven't actually been able to establish, the 11 bouts that were under scrutiny, including the infamous Michael Conlan bout. They haven't been able to establish if they were corrupted because, of course, judging is subjective and in a court of law, you can't get to a point where you can actually say to that gold medalist, you've got to give it back because we've proved that the judging was corrupt. So it's a little bit unsatisfactory in that respect. But no, the fact of the matter is there was corruption within the International Federation. And I guess the most interesting aspect of what came out yesterday was the fact that it's the age-old thing. It was created by financial mismanagement. The fact of the matter is they were on the brink of, as an international federation under this guy, CK Wu, they were on the brink of bankruptcy. They accepted a $10 million loan from Azerbaijan, and there were reports before the London Olympics that Azerbaijan had asked for medals in return for money.
Yeah.
And we also know other Eastern European states were involved in that, that kind of alleged corruption. So, yeah, it's basically they've got a clean house before they can be absolutely invited back by the IOC.
I see. I mean, it's quite tough language, isn't it? By the writer of the report, Professor Richard McLaren. I mean, he's saying if the sport of boxing is to retain its place in the Olympic family, it needs to act now. So it's kind of on its last warning, boxing, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, it is. And, you've got to remember, this is the guy that led the investigation into state-sponsored doping in Russia. He's a heavy hitter. And if he's saying this kind of thing publicly, then they do have to respond. Now, the leadership at it's now called the IBA has changed, and they insist that they are prepared to make these changes and already are making these changes. And one of the things they're doing, I think this was in the second report, is the fact they're using artificial intelligence to assess the
scoring.
But also the honesty of the judges. So they're actually being subjected to almost like lie detector. Yeah, slightly more sophisticated, but they're basically trying to vet all the judges before they become referees and judges.
Matt, I mean, obviously there will be a list of remedies that they're advocating. There were two or three questions that I had for you. Was how extensive and expansive are these remedies? How far back does this go? Because it goes back to 2016. And is there an indication that there is challenges about 2012? Because obviously that was an Olympics that we held in this country. And finally, do you think it's right if the remedies are in any shape or form pushed back on or not observed, that you kind of visit the sins of a father on a son, i.e. the next Olympics? What's your take on those three?
Yeah, look, first of all, there was some evidence that it goes back before 2016. McLaren did say in September that some of this could date back to 2012. So it's possible that the London Olympics was corrupted in some way. In terms of remedies, it really is about the
transparency.
And the big thing is basically having a proper system in place and proper checks in place for the people that are actually ringside making the calls and the people also in the ring, the referees and the judges, as I say. So that's the big thing, is really cleaning house there. The fact is, such was the state of everything before the Tokyo Olympics, that the IOC, they didn't actually deliver their own event. All the international federations will deliver their own event at the Olympics. World Athletics will deliver the athletics at the Olympics. But it was so bad that the IOC, the slight irony, of course, of this is that CK Wu, the president that's largely been blamed for all of this, was also a member of the IOC. So, but the fact is, the IOC took boxing off World Boxing and delivered the boxing event themselves. So, look, I think they'll get there. At the moment, they're not listed for the 28 Olympics in LA, but I'm sure that every effort will be made, particularly with McLaren's people overseeing these reforms. That's one of the key things that they're going to continue.
Who was the
work
whistleblower,
with
Matt? Who was the whistleblower?
That's a good question. I think there's a few, and I think one of them was a very senior. I don't want to name him on here, Simon, because but I think one of them was a very senior former executive.
The thing is, Matt, I think another question that I'd throw at you before we finish at this moment is, would it not be wrong to deny boxers the opportunity to compete at the next Olympics, say, because of the historic actions of others?
Oh, absolutely. The fact of the matter is with this, Jim, is the boxers are the victims.
Yes.
There are boxers who very clearly, in some cases, have been the victims of corrupt judging. The fact that they can't get to that level, and McLaren is a lawyer by trade. The fact they can't get to that level where ex-boxer is told, actually, you did win the gold medal in Rio, so it's in the post. That's the really sad aspect of all this. Oh no, it would be terrible for amateur boxers if they couldn't go to the Olympics.
Yeah.
No, they've just got to sort it out, and you've got to say this is a positive thing. The difference between this and Russia, I would argue, is that there is a willingness now in international boxing to sort it out, whereas in Russia they just have forever remained in denial.
We always thought it was going on, and we now know it's been going on.
Well, the tragedy is you can extrapolate it up to the professional game and talk about some of the, not for the same reasons, but with vested interest influencing the outcome of fights.
Yes.
So you can look at the Jack Catterall, Josh Taylor fight recently and say, there's an example of subjective judging that could have some real questions about it.
That's right.
But it's absolutely right. You cannot really... But the boxers are losing either which way. They either go into a rigged environment and they don't win medals because ultimately it's rigged, or they get taken out of it. So they're in that sort of Hobson's choice. OK, boxing at the Olympics seemingly living on somewhat borrowed time. Matt Lawton, the Times chief sports correspondent. Thanks as always, Matt, for your contribution. It's coming up to 11:15.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.